Denver Broncos rookie quarterback Bo Nix responds from an early turnover in day 4 of Denver Broncos training camp. He went on to throw 3 touchdowns. We'll tell you why that's great poise from a rookie quarterback. But what else happened with the offense in Saturday's practice? We'll break that down and much more here on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Broncos as we break down day 4 of Denver Broncos training camp. Rookie quarterback Bo Nix shakes off an early interception and responds in a big way, tossing 3 touchdowns on the afternoon. We'll take you through what happened on day 4 of Broncos training camp here on today's episode of the show. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports. Cover the team in person every day in Dove Valley. Joined alongside, as always, by Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com. You can check out his written work there every single day. And on top of that, speaking of everydayers, thanks to all the everydayers in Broncos Country for making us your first listen of the day every single day. Wherever you get your podcast or available on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe or follow so you never miss out on what's going on with the Denver Broncos literally every day, all year long. We have you covered. And Sayre, look, we're going to bring Broncos Country inside Broncos training camp day 4 on Saturday. A lot of themes surrounding whether or not the offense was going to respond after a lackluster performance on Friday. Did they do that? Greg Dulcich and several other players continued to stand out, stacking days. But more importantly, the Broncos and the fan base, more importantly, got to see a little bit of poise here from Bo Nix after he threw an early interception in training camp. He responded in a big-time way.
Well, how do you respond to adversity? How do you respond to making a big mistake? Bo Nix talked about it after practice. He's like, I just kind of go about it like I just threw a touchdown, right? And I think I love that mindset, Cody. I've never heard it put that way, but man, when you throw an interception out there, obviously you want to go back and look at the film and see, okay, what were you seeing here? Why did you pull the trigger on this pass? And you know, what happened? What's the mindset on this play? But at the same time, when you're on the field, when you're in the moment, when you're going through practice or when you're in a game, you almost got to treat it like you just threw a touchdown. Like, get it out of your mind. It's neither good nor bad anymore. You have to move on to the next play. So I think we're seeing that kind of, you know, I don't want to say veteran, but kind of veteran poise from somebody like Bo Nix to come back from an interception, which I saw the video footage of it, didn't look great. And to come back and throw 3 touchdown passes throughout the remainder of practice. It's almost like, all right, you don't want to always have an interception to kind of get things going, but it's almost like something got unlocked at that point. And maybe you can attest to that being at the duration of practice. But that's kind of what it seemed like from what I was reading, is that interception sort of unlocked a little something for Bo, and he was able to kind of go on a little heater after that point.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, it wasn't a good decision by Bo. He thought he had Greg Dulcich up the sideline, and I think he tried to put enough touch on it to where maybe it would have hit Dulcich a little bit in front of him. Levi Wallace, veteran cornerback, it's been around the NFL quite some time. We were, had a chance there. Patrick Claybon of the NFL Network was, up there watching on behalf of Back Together Weekend. He's told me he's listening to the show, so obviously we appreciate him. But, I mean, Levi Wallace, like we were talking about, Levi Wallace has been doing this a long time. He's got a high volume of passes defense. He's a smart guy. Did a great job sinking underneath and rising up and getting the interception. The first interception thrown by a Broncos quarterback at training camp. And look, here's where I look at it. Like, we can look at the interception and say, yeah, it was a bad interception, bad decision. Even Bo will agree with you there. But the one thing that I was very curious to see after that interception is, okay, hey, there's still some team period. There's time left. They still have more reps to go through here in this series. That happened to be in the first team period for the Broncos. How is he going to respond? Well, he goes out there, and usually I think one thing coaches are looking at, I know for me specifically, I can't speak for you or anybody else or any fans that may be watching, but I want to see personally, Sayre, okay, after you throw an interception, do you start throwing? Do you play more timid? Do you start to play it more safe? Do you just try to dink and dunk and check down just so you don't make the wrong mistake or, throw another interception? That wasn't the case. Like, he didn't appear to be phased, as you mentioned, by that. He came out in the next team period. He had a couple of connections, one to Greg Dulcich underneath. I think he had another one to Marvin Mims. And then he found Javonte Williams for a touchdown, who had Thomas Incoom trailing in coverage. But we talk about perfect touch on the throw there, high to the outside. Javonte got it. touchdown, Denver. You love to see that response. But then the final team period of the afternoon, okay, let's see what happens in the red zone period, an area where the Broncos could have been drastically better last season. Bo Nix comes out there. He connects, on a couple of pass plays there overall to start. And, you move the chains. I think it was an out route to Brandon Johnson on the first play. Second play, he's looking to connect with Tim Patrick in the end zone for a touchdown. It falls incomplete. It seems like there was confusion between the routes by the two receivers in that area. And so it went out of the back of the end zone. It's a safe play because there's a safe throw. It wasn't thrown into harm's way. But then on that third play, you see Greg Dulcich hauling in a laser from Bo Nix in the back corner of the end zone for a touchdown. And then you get one more play. All right, hey, what are you going to do? You're going to find Samaje Perine out of the backfield on a dump off, and he ran it in for a touchdown as well. So really a great response from Bo Nix, because here's the thing, and I think that you see this on social media, the commentary certainly indicates that. If Bo would have played it safe the rest of the way, I think it would have been a concern in the eyes of the fan base. I think maybe we would have been a little concerned on that too. But he didn't let it phase him, right? And I think that's one thing that we talked about. Can we see poise from a guy like Bo? He certainly demonstrated that in Saturday's practice. I think, it was a good day for him shaking off that early INT.
Yeah, and I saw a couple of videos surfaced of the throw that you mentioned to Samaje Perine. I saw that play, really nice. And like you said, you want to see him continue to be aggressive. Saw the play to Greg Dulcich in the back of the end zone, in the left corner of the end zone from Bo Nix. I mean, just a beautiful, beautiful pass. And certainly love to see, and we'll talk more about Dulcich making the catch on the other end. But I think the foremost news here is the play of Bo Nix at the quarterback position in conjunction with, you start and hear reports from like Jeremy Fowler at ESPN, who's talking about how the Broncos are really impressed with what they're seeing. And it's important to note, like, as we go through the day-to-day of training camp, we know that Sean Payton doesn't want to kind of talk about, all right, here's who won the day today. Here's our grades for today. He's not going to do that. He hates it. And you got to understand why too, if you're listening or if you're watching practice. And Bo Nix, I think, made a great point, Cody. He talked about how when you're at training camp, when you're preparing for a season, the offense is drawing up plays and they're executing these plays. They're not necessarily game planning for the defense that they're facing, and vice versa. The defense isn't game planning. So we may see a play made by the defense on something that was just the Broncos are trying to implement something, get something installed, or go through a red zone concept. Or, a couple of days ago at practice, they were going through third down. You might not have known that unless you were at practice, right? You might not have known unless, somebody like you tells people like, hey, they were practicing just third down today, because a lot of people are going to see, well, Bo Nix completed 7 out of, 12 passes on the day. And it's like, well, okay, yeah, they were doing third down stuff, though. They weren't like trying to do a move the ball session or things like that. And so it's very different when you talk about those types of things. So today, the context is red zone. That's why you're hearing about all these touchdowns. And I think it's important to note when we talk about the fact that, hey, they're not game planning for the defense they're facing. The defense is installing stuff. The offense is installing stuff. We'll see what happens in those game situations when the time comes. But I feel like this is very impressive stuff from Nix to respond from the interception and come out firing thereafter.
You want to see him do that, and I think it's a great sign. And he's got great poise in terms of being able to respawn, bounce back. And I was just looking at his body language. Even after the interception, he wasn't too hard on himself. It was like, I messed up. Now I'm going to go out there the next play and get it. But I think it is interesting to note, though, Sean Payton did say after practice on Saturday that the quarterback rotation, as pads come on Monday, he said going into next week, it could change a little bit. More than likely is going to change a little bit. We don't know what that means, but could it mean more Stidham and Bo Nix exclusively, and then Wilson getting the latter half of the reps? It's certainly a possibility here that there may be less mixing it up for the Broncos quarterback position as training camp goes on. Teams off, obviously, on Sunday. They'll be back on Monday. But who are some other players that stood out? Greg Dulcich is one who continues to stack days. We'll highlight his progress and some others here on today's episode of the show. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at eBay Motors. And passion, drive, patience, the formula for winning championships is what helps keep your number one ride or die alive. eBay Motors, they've got everything that you need to consistently maintain your vehicle and to level it up to peak performance. Whether you get superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors, they have you covered with anything that you might be looking for your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Once again, visit ebaymotors.com.
Confidence is bred from demonstrated ability, as Sean Payton says, which means that, hey, Greg Dulcich, if he continues stacking days, the confidence that he's going to be building up could be dangerous to opposing defenses in 2024. We're going to talk about Greg Dulcich and other standout players at Denver Broncos Training Camp from Saturday's practice, but want to say thank you to every single one of you that makes Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. And you can find Locked On Broncos wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you haven't already, Cody and I would really appreciate if you hit subscribe, or if you go over to YouTube, if you haven't already, hit subscribe over there as we get on the road to 15K subscribers on YouTube. And we want you to do that because we want Locked On Broncos out there in front of everybody in Broncos country. Let's talk about standouts at practice on Saturday, Cody. Of course, there's some videos circulating of Greg Dulcich. And to me, he's probably one of the biggest stories of training camp right now, just because of the element that he brings to the offense. We've talked about it on this show, but it's worth mentioning again. If Greg Dulcich is healthy, he adds a dimension to the offense, a dynamic to the offense, a playmaker that was lacking to the offense last year and in years prior. Quite frankly, he's having a couple of good days to start off training camp. I know it's early, but it's crucial that he's the one stacking these days right now.
Yeah, no, especially with the injury history and whatnot. I think, with the moment he returned to practice for the first time, we said, okay, hey, can he make it to day 2 without any setbacks, right? He made it to day 2 without setbacks. Day 3, can he do the same thing? He's stacking those days in that regard. And look, I don't know how he's feeling after practice. I'm sure all these guys are sore because they're doing a lot of movement. I mean, this is where things start to get a little bit more tougher for them. They get more calloused, as the saying goes, when you start to try to build that during training camp, especially with the pads coming on Monday. I think the thing with Dulcich, and obviously to the reference that you made about the catches that he had on the day, I mean, I think whether it's vertically he's attacking the field, whether it's underneath on crossing patterns, you see exactly what we saw from Greg when he was healthy as a rookie. You're seeing the guy who's got yard after the catch ability. He's got the deceptive speed. He's big. He's a big target and moves very quickly for his size. And that, I think, gives you an advantage. Like, when you clear out, let's say you're running a concept underneath, you clear out maybe, a smaller safety that's covering, or a linebacker who has to drop and take somebody else. You have a guy who's got an advantage when he catches a pass across the middle of the field. He's got the ability to outrun linebackers. He got the ability to maybe outrun some of the safeties and get an edge there. So that's where I'd say, like, for Greg, I've grown impressed with him, and you just want to continue to see that. And I think primarily it's kind of emerged right now to start training camp that it is Dulcich, it is Kroll, it is Troutman really as the top guys here. And we'll see where Nate Adkins gets into the mix. He got a little bit bigger in the offseason, which is a good sign for him. But I mean, obviously promising for Greg Dulcich to step in and obviously continue to have a good streak of, hey, I'm stacking days, staying healthy, making plays. That's exactly what the coaching staff wants to see. But there's also another player I feel like we absolutely have to talk about. He's someone I kind of mentioned a little bit because he caught my eye a little bit last season on the practice squad. Definitely caught my eye during OTAs, mandatory minicamp, got some praise from Sean Payton. But with the injury to Brandon Jones, Devon Key has stepped into the safety role alongside J.L. Skinner, but Devon Key has been making plays. He made a play on the day during the team's red zone period where Jarrett Stidham was looking to connect with Lucas Kroll on a fade route, vertical down the seam there, kind of like a jump ball situation. Devon Key came away and knocked the pass away for a pass breakup, preventing a touchdown from happening. And so what I'm seeing from him, I'm seeing it in team, I'm seeing it in 7-on-7. You're seeing him get to the right spots, getting the right depth in terms of his coverage landmarks, understanding, communicating when to pass off a receiver, when to pick up a receiver. He looks super comfortable. And on top of that, he has kind of taken over as that primary personal protector on the Broncos punt team unit, which, look, that is a big job. That's an important role to have. So he's added more responsibility to his plate. The coaches have done that, and he's also responded defensively, especially with the injury to Brandon Jones.
It's the ideal depth piece for your defense, right? Somebody who's getting this time on task early in training camp, somebody that you trust on special teams, somebody who developed in your system last year, and a guy that you believe in his athletic traits. I mean, that's one of the things that we know Devon Key brings to the table in terms of that RAS score, the athleticism in the defensive backfield. So he, to me, Cody, is taking advantage of a great opportunity because, you know, me, I and I'm sure you as well. I had my Justin Simmons jersey out. We had a prayer circle going, you know, yesterday with the injury news of Brandon Jones. And of course, before, which we'll talk about later, you know, before we knew Caden Stearns was going to be, you know, throwing his helmet on anytime soon. So having somebody like Devon Key go out there and emerge at camp is a big bit of it can't be overstated because the Broncos need depth. They need guys they can trust on special teams and defense. And if this guy's getting those reps right now, well, it's only going to serve the team going forward. And sticking in the defensive backfield, Cody, Reese Taylor is not somebody that people have probably heard a lot about. Former Purdue player. I actually asked one of my friends who's a Purdue fan. I'm like, hey, when the Broncos signed him last year, I'm like, hey, what can you tell me about Reese Taylor? He's like, who? You know, so not even Purdue fans know who this guy is, but it sounds like he's out there making some plays at Broncos training camp.
Yeah, he's doing a really good job, I think, you know, with good coverage. He's not getting beat on assignments. You know, when it's man coverage or zone coverage, he's getting tight on the hip of the receivers. He had a near interception in Friday's practice of Bo Nix on one of the plays there. And then Saturday's practice, he had a knockaway, you know, in coverage while he covered. I think it was Lil Jordan Humphrey or Brandon Johnson was one or the other. He was covering them in Zach Wilson's final period in the red zone drill there, had a knockaway. He just continues to have an under the radar camp. I mean, that is a loaded position group. I had a chance to talk with Riley Moss one-on-one following Broncos practice on Saturday. We'll get some more insight. I'll share some audio clips here on the show for Monday's episode of Locked On Broncos. We'll dive deeper to that for Broncos country. But I mean, there's just so much competition at corner right now. You have so many guys getting in the mix. And so it's going to be an exciting time, especially once the joint practices roll around, when you have your first preseason game, which is, I think, 2 weeks away at this point, 2.5 weeks. So there's a lot to be excited about if you are a Broncos fan. Sticking on the defensive side of the ball, there's a guy at linebacker, right? Obviously a deep competition between Jonas Griffith and obviously Cody Barton. Jonas Griffith was a standout, in my opinion, during Saturday's practice, particularly in 7-on-7. It's a great opportunity for your linebackers to go through and test, all right, hey, can you get to your spots? Can you get to your depth on your drops, whether you're in zone coverage? Can you play man coverage in certain situations? Can you maintain your coverage responsibility there as a pass defender? Look, Jonas Griffith is 6'4". He's got size. One thing I noticed, and hopefully anyone who's in attendance can back me up on this, Jonas moves so well from an athletic standpoint laterally. Like, he's quick and he's long. Like, we talk about his wingspan. This is a guy who covers ground quick. He had a great pass breakup in 7-on-7 against Marvin Mims in coverage. Like, did a great job, like getting depth, saw that Marvin was settling, burst on the football, got his hand around Marvin's hip, knocked the football away. And then all of a sudden, okay, it's an incomplete pass there. Like, that was a great sign to see from Jonas, and his pursuit to the football from a run standpoint has been good so far in camp. We'll wait to see what it maybe looks like when the pads come on. But I think at linebacker, this is a promising development as well for Denver's defense, seeing the athleticism and the range of Jonas Griffith, who certainly does have all the traits necessary to become a special player.
And Sean Payton said after practice that, you know, Jonas is kind of like the Tim Patrick of the defense, right? Where it's just like, you've heard all these things, you trust what George Payton has said about him, what the previous, you know, regime said about him, or previous his teammates say about him, and you love the guy for what you know about him as a person. But what are you seeing on the field? Like, this is Sean Payton's real first opportunity, and so he's still at the I'm excited to work with him stage. Like, that's where they're at. And that's where Sean is at with Tim Patrick as well. So it's kind of fun that the Broncos have a couple of guys like this, that the front office is like, no, these guys are the real deal. They're legit. And Sean Payton's like, all right, I love it. Let's go. Let's see him on the field. And so we're getting this opportunity to kind of see a secondary breakout of players like Tim Patrick and Jonas Griffith on either side of the ball. And if Jonas can be that guy, I mean, I know it's been a couple of years since we were talking about that, but if he can be that guy next to Alex Singleton, he may be the guy beyond this year, depending on what the Broncos decide to do with Singleton after this season.
A lot of decisions and a lot of questions as this season is fast approaching on all of us here in Broncos country. But one thing we will dive deep into, there is some clarity on the injury status of Brandon Jones after he suffered a hamstring injury. We teased it a little bit earlier. Caden Stearns was back on the field with a helmet. What does his timeline look like? You get those types of injury updates. Plus, pads coming on here soon. We'll dive deep into that here on today's episode, Locked on Broncos. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over there at LinkedIn Jobs. And whether you own your own small business or you're part of a small business that's looking to hire their next professional, the right professional for the job, LinkedIn Jobs is the place to look, because LinkedIn Jobs, they have the tools that help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses, they get a qualified candidate within 24 hours of posting a job. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn knows that small businesses that are wearing so many hats, they may not have the time or the resources to hire, but they make it easy for you. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a brand new feature that helps you write job descriptions, which makes the process quicker when you're posting a job. Over 2.5 million small businesses, they use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedon NFL. That's linkedin.com/lockedon NFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. As we jump to the fourth quarter action on today's episode of Locked On Broncos, real quick, I want to say thanks once again to everyone in Broncos country. Thanks for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day. To all the everydayers out there, we appreciate you so much. And I'll stress it as always. If you're not an everyday listener of the show, we got to ask you, what are you doing? Don't you want daily Broncos news, coverage, content, and updates? I'm at practice every single day. Sayre and I bring you deep dive analysis as to what's going on from a team building standpoint and from an objective point of view. So if you're not an everyday listener just yet, make the switch, become an everydayer on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast here. All right, so we'll close out today's episode of the show, Sayre, with some news and notes and some updates from day 4 of Broncos training camp practice. I know some people are counting it. They're thinking it's day 2. It's day 4 because I've been at 4 practices for the Broncos that's considered training camp. I think we're all in agreement. It's going to be day 4. We're going to keep the long game going here as the show progresses here. But we did get some clarity, and I saw, and I talked about it in yesterday's episode, Locked On Broncos. I saw your article that you wrote about, hey, panic button, like the sirens are blaring, get Justin Simmons back on the Broncos after Brandon Jones' hamstring injury came up. We got some clarity on the timeline there from Sean Payton. Says expected probably the next 2 weeks, we won't see Jones on the field. And I think it is important that we do mention this, is that going back to OTAs, there were also 2 days where he missed with a little bit of a lower leg injury. So I'm not sure if it's the same injury that's lingering on, but then you had 5-6 weeks off and now you have a hamstring injury again. This is definitely something I think worth monitoring here for the Broncos.
I just think the Broncos are playing with fire at the safety position. I really do. I know we just talked about Devon Key and complimented what he's been doing as a depth piece, but I think that's the ideal role for him this season, is playing that depth role and not necessarily saying, hey, if this guy needs to start 10, 11 games, I don't like that idea. And not that I don't like Devon Key. I'm just saying, when you have the opportunity to sign somebody still like Justin Simmons. I mean, we might have turned the sirens off after yesterday, Cody, but I still think the bat signal is up in the air right now for Justin. It's like, and the Broncos don't seem to necessarily share that perspective, and maybe Justin doesn't either. I don't know where everything is in terms of that, but I just feel like he's available. Teams that have needed veteran free agent safeties have gone other directions. The Titans signed Jamal Adams. The Baltimore Ravens, who were a rumored potential spot for Justin, they signed Eddie Jackson. And we've seen other teams signing other veteran safeties in recent weeks here. So I'm at the point now where I'm saying, like, Justin lives in Denver, or at least I assume he still lives in Denver. So let's give him a call. Let's get Chris Abrams-Drain a new number. Let's give him, I don't care what number you give him a new number. Give Justin his old 31 back. Everybody can go on to Fanatics and buy the $70 discounted jerseys, and then Justin will be back on the team, and it'll be the biggest bargain of the offseason in multiple ways. I just don't like this at all. I think when you have the opportunity, this is clearly something we're going to point back to. If the Broncos don't sign Justin back, if they struggle with health at the safety position at any point this year, and they had a chance to bring Justin back, it is going to be something that's worth getting on Sean Payton and George Payton's back about.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's so evident right now just because it's like right there in front of your face. Like, hey, Justin is literally 15 minutes away from the Broncos facility in terms of where he lives. He could easily come in, sign a contract, pass his physical, bang. Then, you get jump started. It's like he never left, to be honest with you. There's just been a little bit of a break. And who knows? Maybe that could happen still. Maybe that is still in the works here because if this, as we've seen, if this hamstring injury lingers, as hamstring injuries tend to linger with athletic players and players who are fast and move fast, this is definitely a concern. And look, yeah, you want to see JL Skinner and Devon Key take a bump up in terms of what they can do, but do you want to take the risk of, okay, hey, we're going to further develop this guy, which is obviously a goal of the team, but do we want to maybe miss out on production at the position potentially because of that? I don't know if the Broncos are in a position right now, especially if they want to win, to be able to do that. Win now means, hey, go out there and get Justin Simmons. You don't believe you're going to win this year? Okay, then you're staying put at this point. So we'll see where Denver ultimately ends up and obviously where Justin ends up. This is something we will monitor, but also some good news at the safety position. Caden Stearns back out there with his helmet. He passed his physical and is off the PUP list, but the Broncos, as Sean Payton told us after practice, they're going to be smart with how they monitor and how they just implement him in there. Now, I will say this. He participated in team stretch. He participated in individual drills during, the Indy period, not team drills though, which is obviously you don't want to throw him into team drills right away. Let him go through the positional stuff, see how he feels, see how the knee's feeling after practice, go through the treatment recovery process. Denver's not rushing him back, which is the smart move here. But, it's going to be good to have him back. And obviously, if this injury with Brandon Jones lingers, you certainly want Caden to be ready sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. And that's great news. A great sign. Great to see number 23 out there on the field in a helmet. I saw the photos of it. So really good stuff. And I love what Caden Stearns brings to the table. I did have a question, Cody, too, based on the idea of kind of slowly easing guys back when we're in the season, right? And injured players are getting work on the side field. It's usually a positive sign that the player is getting close to coming back to practice. Now, in training camp, in the offseason, I saw your report over at Mile High Sports. You said Delarian Turner-Yell, Drew Sanders, and I believe one other player were working
Nick
on
Gargiulo.
Nick Gargiulo. So let's focus in on the longer term injured guys there with Sanders and Delarian Turner-Yell. I found it very interesting that you said they were practicing or working on the side, not practicing on the side, working on the side field. What does that mean in training camp versus the regular season? Because I feel like those would be different distinctions possibly, because it doesn't seem like Drew or Delarian would be coming back rather soon, but maybe correct me if I'm wrong on that.
I think Delarian is making great progress in his recovery from ACL. I think he could be ready by October or, mid to late September. I think that's, a potential timeline for him. He's sprinting, doing conditioning. I think for other guys you mentioned like Drew Sanders, we'll be very curious to see when he'll be ready, especially coming off an Achilles. But I can tell you this, just watching him walk around the facility, he's walking around in his jersey. He's not limping. He's not doing anything like that. He had a successful surgery. So he's on the side field, I think, just doing normal rehab. Like when players are rehabbing in the offseason, like when there is no practice, they go out there. Obviously, they'll do stuff in the weight room, they'll stuff in the training room, but they will transition and go do some stuff out there on that side field, even when we're not able to attend. Just part of the rehab process. So I still think the timeline for him is probably, a bit of ways away. There's still indefinite at this point, but I think Turner-Yell's making good progress. We don't know what Gargiulo's injury or ailment is. He left practice the other day and then, was not out there for one day and then was back out yesterday and then was on the side field today. So I'm not sure where we're at with that in terms of following that. But one player who was also on the side field to start Broncos training camp was Nick Bonito for the first couple of practices. He was also back at practice for Saturday as well. So I think the Broncos just continue to monitor that, but he's getting reps. He's getting in there. And you've had opportunities for guys like Darrell and Chami to step up and get some reps, and he's looked good. Thomas Incomb's had some good reps. So really an outside linebacker behind Jonah Ellis. And I think maybe Jonah's in that conversation too, even though we know what he can bring to the table. Like Jonah's going to have some competition. I still think he's going to be the fourth pass rusher. They're going to keep 5 in my opinion, but you're going to see some guys push, like Chami's going to push. Incomb's going to push a little bit as well. They're not going to make it easy on the rookie. So some good news and notes, obviously, on day 4 of Broncos camp. But Sayre, I got some really good news for you. I got some good news for everyone in Broncos country. the pads come on Monday, which is the most important thing. Like when we're going through and we're evaluating this team, we're evaluating practices, we're actually seeing pads and contact. To me, that's where we're like, all right, maybe we can take more stock in this happening. The offensive line, a run by the running backs, things like that. That's what I'm excited about. Happens on Monday.
I can't wait, Cody. I mean, when the pads come on is when the intensity turns up. It's when you get the opportunity to evaluate every position on the field. And I know that they can't fully tackle guys. I know that there's not an opportunity to go to you don't want to go to the ground, but when the pads come on, the intensity level turns up. And when the intensity level turns up, the competitive juices start flowing a little bit differently. I mean, it's just way different for these guys out there. So I can't wait for it. I think that we're going to get a better look at the running backs. We're going to get a better look at the pass rushers, defensive line. And you and I are going to talk about that on an episode, just kind of what we're looking for as the pads do come on. But it can't be overstated. It's a game changer in terms of evaluating who's going to be making the roster, who's going to be making an impact, individual player performance, all those sorts of things. It changes everything when the pads come on at training camp.
Well, you did a great job of teasing that, because Broncos Country, for all you everydayers out there, Monday's episode, you can expect us to talk about 3 things that we're looking forward to seeing when the pads do come on. Plus, you'll get a little bit of an insight into the Riley Moss interview that we had following Saturday's practice. You get that much more on Monday's episode. Locked On Broncos. We'll see you then.